everyone. Bonnie here. Happy Monday. While everyone's getting signed on, I'm going to take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Bonnie. I'm a mother of 5, grandmother of 3. I'm a law enforcement officer. I've been working for a local law enforcement agency for 20 years. As we were going into this whole coronavirus experience, I was a youth relations deputy assigned to the high school that my 2 teenage boys attended. And I was working a Monday through Friday school hour schedule and had literally just a few days prior to coronavirus hitting us, I'd received word that the not-for-profit that I had been pouring everything I had into for the last 2 years was scheduled to launch in June. So I was super excited about that. And the book that I've been working on for the last 5 years was due to publish at any day. Hi, Jack. Welcome. Glad you're here. So anyway, I'm going to get right into what I'm talking about, just because I have a lot to say today. So on March 14th, as I drove through Florida on my way home from Tennessee, on our way home from Tennessee, I began receiving text messages and phone calls about school being canceled because of coronavirus. And I honestly had no idea that we had gotten this far, or this was happening the way that it was. Hi, Rose. Before I even made it home from Tennessee, as I'm driving, I get a phone call from my sergeant that the Youth Relations Bureau that I work for was being temporarily dissolved, and I was being reassigned to communications, which communications is where I started in the agency. So for now, that's where I've been reassigned, which means that I've been put back onto shift work. Before I was working Monday through Friday, so now I'm on shift work again. And as I realized that this was going to be, this was not going to be a short-term move, I asked them to go ahead and put me where I was most needed, which is evening shift. So now I'm working shift works in the evening and working as many hours as I can as I help all of us get through this, and the rest of my life has been put on hold, just kind of like everybody else. So my publisher brought to my attention that everything that I'd been through when my son Timmy needed his bone marrow transplant, the self-isolation, the social distancing might be helpful. Hi, Steve. Thank you. The self-isolation might be helpful. What I learned might be helpful to everybody else, so she suggested that I share. Last week, I talked about how during my son's recovery process, my insecurities that I thought had been in my past decided to rear their ugly head for a period of time. And I became really disappointed and angry with myself that my body and my mind did not seem to fall in line with the faith that I developed in my heart. And this caused me to really lean into my faith even more by reading and listening to things on faith as much as possible. So to be completely transparent with you, it's a little challenging for me to publicly share my faith like this. I don't think my publisher understood. Hi, Ron. Thank you. I miss you too. I don't think my publisher understood that for me to share with you what I learned in my social distancing experience, it would be mostly about my faith. And it's a little difficult for me to publicly share my faith the way that I am, because I've faced a lot of judgmental people. I've encountered a lot of judgmental people that judge me because I chose the Bible and Jesus to help me cope with life and what life was handing me. So this is a little challenging for me, but anyway, I'm gonna share with you something that I ran into. So in an effort to starve my faith, I made a conscious effort to starve my fear. I made a conscious effort to feed my faith every day, right? And in doing that, I started to see how truly unpredictable life was. So as when I went into the bone marrow transplant process, I realized that control is an illusion, that we don't have control. But then, hi Leslie, I love you too. But then as I really started to dive into my faith, I fully realized how unpredictable life was and how it could be limitless if we believed it to be that, and that anything is possible at any given moment, not just in the negative way, but also in the positive way. So while I was with my son, one of the favorite messages that I found was from Kenneth Hagin. It was actually a combination of a lot of messages, but in one of the messages he talks about how doubt is our biggest thief, right? In this story, he references the moment in the Bible where Peter walks on water. So Jesus and the disciples were in this one area, and he asked the disciples to all get in the boat and go to the other side of the lake. They were at this big lake, and he tells the disciples, get in the boat and go to the other side of the lake. And Jesus goes up to a hill, which is right there overlooking the lake, and he goes up there to pray. And while he's there, he sees the boat, and he sees a big storm hit, and he sees the disciples struggling to get to where he told them to go. Now, this to me is like a whole nother message in itself about how Jesus tends to send us places and storms show up. That's kind of seems to be a given throughout the Bible. But anyway, so it's about 4 a.m. The disciples are on a boat. They're in the middle of the lake. This big storm's hitting, and Jesus is watching them, and he decides that he's going to walk out onto the lake, out towards where the boat is, right? So when they see Jesus walking on the water, they freak out, rightfully so, right? If you're in the middle of a lake in a storm and you see a man walking on the water, you're going to be freaking out too, and they think it's a ghost. And so as they're freaking out, Jesus tells them, calm down, it's me, relax, it's just me walking on water, right? No big deal. Well, Peter is one of the disciples that's on the boat, and he is, like, as you read about him throughout the stories, he's like the most outspoken, unpredictable disciple. And he yells out to Jesus, if it's really you, tell me to come with you. And Jesus replies to him, in the story, it just says that Jesus replies, come. Well, to me, come means anybody that's listening can come. That doesn't, and Jesus knew the boat was full of people. He didn't say, Peter, only you can come. He just said, come. So anybody that's on the boat could have gotten out of the boat and went to Jesus. But anyway, only Peter gets out of the boat in that moment, and he walks on top of the water towards Jesus. Hi, Jesse, I miss you. And I kind of feel like this is where I was at when Timmy got sick. So when I found out Timmy was sick, I had spent a lot of years between my divorce and Timmy's transplant, really looking over my life and trying to understand how I had gotten to where I was. In one of my trainings, like for the sheriff's office, I actually had an instructor tell me that my adverse childhood experience score had given me a 4,600% chance of being an intravenous drug addict, which is nice to know. So looking at my life, there was no logical reason that I should be standing, much less thriving. I knew that there was no logical reason why I had come as far as I did, and I couldn't have done that without God's help. So taking all that into consideration and having achieved what I had so far, it kind of felt like I had been given the opportunity to figuratively walk on water, right? So getting back to Peter, as he gets closer to Jesus and he gets closer to where Jesus is, like so many of us do, he went from looking at Jesus and focusing on his faith in Jesus and started looking at the storm around him. And when he looks at the wind and the waves, he starts to sink. So for a moment, he completely forgot how far Jesus had brought him and allowed the wind and the wave to overtake his heart and his mind. And he started to sink. So, and I feel like that's what began happening to me when I was in the hospital with Timmy. I took my focus off of all that God had brought me through so far. And my faith in the fact there was no way that he had brought me that far just to let me drown there. And I started focusing on the wind and waves of everything that was happening. In addition to Timmy being sick, I really had complete faith that Timmy was going to be healed, but he wasn't the only thing that was happening. Like this coronavirus thing, you might have faith that you're not going to get the coronavirus or it's not going to hurt you, but it's not just the virus that's happening, it's the rest of life that's happening along with it. It's the work issues and the family issues and the financial issues and the health issues and not being able to see people and go places. Like our lives have just been turned upside down, or we've kind of been put in a boat in the middle of a hurricane and we really don't have any end in sight, right? But I love how in the book of Matthew, it explains Jesus' response to Peter sinking. Peter, with no hesitation, it says that immediately Jesus stretched out his hands and lifted Peter up. Now, stop here for a second. Hi Dan, hi Nicole. As I was growing up, as I would hear the story, I always heard it as Jesus was chastising Peter, like he got irritated with Peter for sinking into the water. And the words that came out of his mouth were, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" in a way that he was like mad at Peter. But as I started to really think about this and I started to really process the story, I pictured Jesus as like somebody who's watching a child take their first steps. I don't know if you've ever done that, but you have this, like you're almost holding your breath and you have this, you don't want to show any excitement because you don't want to startle them and you don't want to scare them, but I feel like Jesus was jumping up and down inside in that moment thinking, Peter's really, really doing it. He's really walking on water with me. So when Peter sinks, it's not that he's mad. He's like a parent scooping up a child after they stumble, after taking their first few steps, and he says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" At one translation of the Bible, he says, "What little faith you have, why did you let doubt win?" Not because he's chastising him, but because he believes in him and he just wants him to believe in himself. As I was preparing the story, I remembered back when I was a kid, I was in gymnastics and I loved gymnastics. And I always pictured myself as this great gymnast, and I watched the gymnasts on TV and I really wanted to be like this really great gymnast, right? But when it came time to do the back handsprings or the no-handed cartwheels, when the instructor was there and she had her hands like around my waist or under my back and she was there close enough to touch me, I did fine. Like I did back handsprings, I did no-handed cartwheels, and I had all the confidence in the world. But as soon as she stepped away, as soon as all that was left was my faith and what she taught me, I'd fall on my head every time, right? And I would let doubt won every time. And even thinking about that now, the fact that I never was able to overcome that still bothers me. And so when I saw that question in the Bible, like, why did you let doubt win? It brought me back to that moment. And I never thought of it that way. Kenneth Hagin talked about how in that moment, Peter missed it. The man walked on water, but he still missed the full blessing that he was meant to receive. So the full blessing would have been Peter gets out of the boat, he walks on water to Jesus, he gets to Jesus, he fist bumps, he high fives, he gives Jesus a hug, and together, with all the confidence in the world, he walks back to the boat and they get in the boat together. Can you imagine the confidence that Peter would have gained in that moment? How how he would have truly, completely understood that anything was possible as long as he kept his focus and his faith on Jesus. Like, that would have been awesome. And then not to mention, not just Peter, but what about the guys in the boat? Like the guys in the boat that are watching this happen and kicking themselves because they didn't think to get out of the boat. I find it interesting that Matthew, Mark, hi Judy, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all talk about Jesus walking on water, but only Matthew mentions that Peter got out of the boat. I kind of feel like they probably did what most of us do as humans, and they got stuck on the fact that Peter sunk, and they missed the awesomeness of the fact that Peter had the faith to just get out of the boat. Or maybe they were mad because they didn't have the guts to get out of the boat. But as I listened to Kenneth Hagin talk about the story and describe it the way that he did, I feel like there's 4 different people in the story. So there's first, you have the people who know Jesus, who they got in the boat just like Jesus asked them to. They have a clear view of the miracles a relationship with him can bring into their lives. But somehow they don't believe all the miracles are for them. They never have the confidence to get out of the safety or the familiarity of the boat. But then you have that second person, you have Peter, that for a moment in the middle of the storm, he throws caution to the wind and he goes for it because Jesus said he can get out of the boat. So he does, he gets out of the boat until he forgets the whole reason he was able to get out of the boat in the first place. And he sinks into this place where the memory of his doubt interrupting his faith is all he has. And if I remember correctly, if I remember my teaching correctly, Mark, the book of Mark, is actually written based on what Peter told Mark to write. So Peter's the one out of Mark, Luke, and John who decided not to add the fact that he walked on water into that book. And I thought that was interesting. So Peter himself seemed to want to forget the miracle of him being able to walk on water. But then the third person I thought of is the people that never make it to the boat at all. The ones that live through life storms, who experience all the same things that the rest of us experience, but never get to know what it's like to have that faith and trust in Jesus, and never get to experience the miracles that come along with a life with Jesus. And then after those 3 people, when I listened to Kenneth Hagin's story, I realized that there's a 4th person. And I decided that I wanted to be that 4th person. The one Kenneth Hagin talks about is the one that fully grasps the miracle of knowing Jesus and all that he's able to bring into our lives. I don't want to miss it. No matter how big the storms get, I want to know the awesomeness of walking back to the boat. Not just for me, though. It's not really about me at all. Our lives are always affecting others, just like Peter and the guys in the boat are. I want my life to be the biggest blessing that it was meant to be, not simply for me, but because I want to touch the lives of other people. I want them to look at me, and I want my life to naturally reflect the awesomeness of fully knowing and trusting in Jesus. So this life that we live in, life happens, it's unpredictable. Anything is possible in any direction. One of my biggest pet peeves in working in the public service is that at least once a week, somebody asks me when I'm going to retire. And my answer to them is usually that God's going to open the door and I'm going to run through it with my hair on fire. Not because I don't like my job. I love my job. I love what I do, and I am so grateful for what the last 20 years has given me and my family. But I know that this can't be all there is. I did not come down this far just to count the days until my retirement. I want to spend every day possible helping others and helping them to see how anything is possible if they choose to believe in themselves and in Jesus. So if I've come this far, I know anything is possible, and I want to walk back to the boat, but again, not just for me, but because so that I can give that to other people. One of the scriptures that came out to me in all this is Hebrew 13:9 says, Jesus is eternally changeless, always the same, yesterday, today, and forever. So life may be unpredictable. Life may be completely unpredictable, but Jesus is not. In John 10:10, Jesus tells us that he came that we may have life and have it to the full until it overflows. And one of my favorite verses of all times is Ephesians 3:20, which tells us that God is able to carry out his purpose and do super abundantly. Isn't that an awesome word? Super abundantly, more than all that we can ask, think, or imagine, infinitely beyond our greatest prayers, hopes, and dreams, according to his power that is at work within us. That's just an awesome scripture. So that no matter what life throws at us, no matter what storms we live through, we still get to choose what we're going to believe, and we still get to choose how we're going to respond, and we still get to choose the people we're going to be in that storm. I find it interesting when you get into the Bible and what is happening in the Bible, it shows that the disciples are really truly this band of misfits, of the most unlikely people that could have been picked to change the world. And Peter seems to be the most dysfunctional disciple of them all. And but even though Peter sank and he continued to stumble, I mean, the Bible shows all the different things where Peter kind of stepped on it and stuck his foot in his mouth. But eventually Peter did walk back to the boat. So in Acts 2, after Jesus dies and he's resurrected and he shows Peter what he truly came to do, Peter stands up in front of thousands of people and he boldly preaches the first sermon ever of the Christian church. And he brings over 3,000 people into believing in Jesus. So I picture Jesus up in heaven ecstatic because Peter finally got it. And I think that's how Jesus is with all of us, that he's up there, he's kind of on the edge of his seat, like watching us, waiting for us to fully trust and believe in him. Now, if Peter, if in his, stumbling and sinking, can be the awesome leader that he was, if it can happen for Peter, I feel like it can happen for any of us. Just like I said, like if I can come this far, if my life can be what it is, then I really feel like anybody is capable of anything. I want people to believe in themselves, I want them to see that anything is possible when we choose to believe, that if we can take the limits off of our thinking and our thought process, that there's so much that we can do to not only help ourselves, but to help others. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for coming and joining me. I really appreciate all of your support. I have been getting great messages and feedback, and it's awesome. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday. Have a great week. Bye.